Good morning, you holiday weekend churchgoers. It's good to be with you this morning. Please stand as you're willing and able. Let's sing together, Morning Has Come. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe truth is larger than any one book or way. Religion and science go hand in hand. Integrity requires freedom of conscience. Diversity is something to celebrate. In the struggle for justice, we come alive. Our highest aspiration and calling is love. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever path you're on, you are welcome here. Please be seated.
Good morning. And welcome again to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church. Really is great to have everyone here this morning on a holiday weekend, and also want to welcome anyone who is joining us from home. We have a lot of good stuff as usual going on, so please check out your West Shore Weekly in the order of service or in the e-newsletter that you've received if you're at home, for many, many ways that you can get involved and be part of this amazing community. This morning, we are so excited to welcome our guest speaker, Reverend Dr. Andy Burnette. He is a staff chaplain and pastoral educator candidate at the Lewis Stokes VA Medical Center in Cleveland. He served congregations from 2000 to 2020, most recently Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation in suburban Phoenix. And he is a past member of the UUA Board of Trustees. He lives in Cleveland Heights now with his wife Heather and their two children, Sasha and Venus. Let's now take a few moments to greet each other warmly. I don't think we have RE this morning, so if you see someone that you haven't met before, say hello and never forget to wave at our folks at home.
Remembering the journey of freedom, the land we are on was once another's. We bore the legacies of oppression. Healing is our way forward. Joy is the birthright of all.
It's always so fun to feel the energy just going, and then we make you sit back down. So please hold on to that and hang on to it till the service is over, and we're going to all have a chance to chat some more. So for the offertory this morning, I'm going to share a poem by May Sarton called Somersault. Not to rebel against what pulls us down, the private burdens each of us could name, that weigh heavily in the blood and bone, so that we stumble, clumsy half the time, unable to love well or love at all. Who knows the full weight that another bears? What obscure densities sustains alone to burst fearfully through what self-locked doors? So heavy is our walk with what we feel and cannot tell and cannot ever tell. Oh, to have the lightness, the savoir-faire of a tightrope walker, his quicksilver tread as he runs softly over the taut steel thread, sharp as a knife blade, cutting walls of air. He's pitted against weights we cannot see, all tensions balanced, though we see him only a rapture of grace and skill, focused and lonely? Is it a question of discipline or grace? The steel trap of the will, or some slight shift within an opened consciousness? The tightrope walker juggles weights to lift himself up on the stress, and airy master of his own loss, he springs from heaviness. But we, stumbling our way, how learn such poise, the perfect balance of all griefs and joys? Burdened by love, how learn the light release that out of stress can somersault to peace? The community we create here together at West Shore, through our generosity of time, talent, and money, serves as a place where we learn to walk that tightrope of life together. We help each other maintain our balance, and we help each other put the pieces back together again when we fall. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. The offering will now be given and gratefully received. This morning, instead of a reflection, I'm going to share a reading from the miraculous journey of Edward Tulane, which you'll hear more about from Reverend Burnette. Once there was a China rabbit who was loved by a little girl. The rabbit went on an ocean journey and fell overboard and was rescued by a fisherman. He was buried under garbage and unburied by a dog. He traveled for a long time and worked for a short time as a scarecrow. Once there was a rabbit who loved a little girl and watched her die. The rabbit danced on the streets of Memphis. His head was broken open in a diner and was put together again by a doll mender. And the rabbit swore that he would not make the mistake of loving again. In this chapter that I'm going to share some of, Edward finds himself in a doll shop. In the gloom of the shop, Edward could see that the doll's head, like his, had been broken and repaired. Her face was, in fact, a web of cracks. She was wearing a baby bonnet. "How do you do?" she said in a high, thin voice. "Hello," said Edward. "Have you been here long?" she asked. "Months and months," said Edward. "But I don't care. One place is the same as another to me." "Oh, not for me," said the doll. "I have lived 100 years, and in that time I have been in places that were heavenly and others that were horrid. After a time, you learn that each place is different, and you become a different doll in each place, too, quite different." Edward thought about everything that had happened to him in his short life. What kind of adventures would you have if you were in the world for a century? The old doll said, "I wonder who will come for me this time. Someone always comes. Who will it be?" "I don't care if anyone comes for me," said Edward. "But that's dreadful," said the old doll. "There's no point in going on if you feel that way. No point at all. You must be filled with expectancy. You must be awash in hope. You must wonder who will love you, whom you will love next." "I am done with being loved," Edward told her. "I'm done with loving. It's too painful." "Pfft," said the old doll. "Where is your courage?" "Somewhere else, I guess," said Edward. "You disappoint me," she said. "You disappoint me greatly. If you have no intention of loving or being loved, then the whole journey is pointless." In the morning, the first customer was a little girl with her father. The girl studied each doll carefully. She looked Edward right in the eyes. "Have you decided, Natalie?" her father asked. "Yes," she said. "I want the one in the baby bonnet. She needs me." When they left, when the girl's father opened the door for his daughter and the doll, a bright shaft of early morning light came flooding in, and Edward heard quite clearly, as if she were still sitting right next to him, the old doll's voice. "Open your heart," she said gently. "Someone will come. Someone will come for you. But first, you must open your heart." The door closed. The sunlight disappeared. Edward's heart stirred. "No, no," he told himself. "Don't believe it. Don't let yourself believe it." But it was too late. Someone will come for you. The china rabbit's heart had begun again to open.
Please rise once more as you're able and willing. Sing together, "There's a river flowing in my soul." Please be seated. I want to move into a time of meditation, of prayer, and I want to invite us as we begin to focus on our breathing. So here's what we'll do together. 3 counts inhaling, 2 counts holding at the top of our breath, and then 5 or 6 counts on the exhale. That longer exhale sends a signal to our bodies that we're safe, we don't have to go anywhere, that we can be here for a while. So we're just going to breathe together here for a couple minutes. Let's breathe in for 3, 1, 2, 3, and hold, 2, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5. In again, 1, 2, 3, and hold, 2, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do a couple more of those silently, if you will. Please continue with me in an attitude of quiet meditation, of prayer. We offer gratitude this morning for the day, for the joy of the unofficial beginning of summer, for the weather that we have today, and for this community, this gathering of people, this place of support and healing, of love and acceptance, of justice. This is a complicated weekend. Tomorrow, Memorial Day, a complicated day on which we grieve the deaths of too many young people in warfare. We give thanks for the courage and dedication that inspire people to serve their country. And we pray for greater wisdom and authenticity from the leaders who are charged with sending them into war. We long for the day when war will cease, as the prophet Isaiah said, when swords are beaten into plowshares. But let us not grow weary in doing good. Let us instead bring one another strength and courage and love, and let us learn to rely on that from others when we struggle to find it ourselves. Amen. I want to reflect with you this morning, as Terry was saying, on one of my favorite stories. It's a story of a China rabbit written in the children's book, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane by Kate DiCamillo. I think in a way, Edward is each of us. Edward is a porcelain rabbit made for little Abilene by her mother, Pellegrina. He is Abilene's favorite toy. She sits him in a chair when she leaves for school so that he can look out the window while she's gone. She sits him in a chair beside her at dinner time. She treats Edward as a friend, as a real live being, which in fact, though he can't move or speak, he is. Here's a scene from early in the book. In the evening, Edward sat at the dining room table with the other members of the Tulane family, her mother and father, and Abilene's grandmother, who was called Pellegrina. True, Edward's ears barely cleared the tabletop, and true also, he spent the duration of the meal staring straight ahead at nothing but the bright and blinding white of the tablecloth. But he was there, a rabbit at the table. Abilene's parents found it charming that Abilene considered Edward real, and that she sometimes requested that a phrase or story be repeated because Edward had not heard it. Papa, Abilene would say, "I'm afraid that Edward didn't catch that last bit." Abilene's father would then turn in the direction of Edward's ears and speak slowly, repeating what he had just said for the benefit of the China rabbit. Edward pretended out of courtesy to Abilene to listen, but in truth, he was not very interested in what people had to say, end quote. This was Edward's manner. He was so very proud of his looks, of his clothes, and he didn't really have much concern for Abilene or anybody else for that matter. The family had decided to go on vacation, but not just any vacation. They were taking a ship to England. Abilene packed Edward's finest suits, quote, so that he might cut a fine figure in London, end quote. And off they went. Everybody except Pellegrina, who would stay behind to watch over the house. So as the rest of the family boarded the ship and it pulled away from the harbor, Abilene waved back at her grandmother. Here are Edward's thoughts. Edward felt something damp in his ears. Abilene's tears, he supposed. He wished that she would not hold him so tight. To be clutched so fiercely often resulted in wrinkled clothing, end quote. On the ship, Edward was a hit. All the little girls wanted to hold him, but Abilene wouldn't allow it. But two little boys snatched Edward away from Abilene and began to toss him back and forth between them, keeping him away from Abilene. Abilene cried out to them to stop, but they wouldn't. Back and forth, until one of them missed. The other boy had thrown Edward too high, and over the side of the ship he went into the ocean. Quote, "How does a China rabbit die? Can a China rabbit drown? Is my hat still on my head?" These were the questions that Edward asked himself as he went sailing out over the blue sea. The sun was high in the sky, and from what seemed to be a very long way away, Edward heard Abilene call his name. "Edward," she shouted, "come back. Come back." Of all the ridiculous things to shout, thought Edward. Of all the ridiculous things to shout. I was jolted by this reaction of Edward's to Abilene's cry. Ridiculous. To shout, "Come back." Of course, in a sense, he was right. It was ridiculous. Edward couldn't even move. How was he going to swim back to the ship and to Abilene? But what Edward didn't understand was that there was more to what Abilene was saying. Abilene loved him. She was expressing grief. And in his struggle to see beyond her words to her meaning, to her experience, I saw myself in Edward Tulane. At the time I read this book for the first time, about 15 years ago now, I was doing work for Indiana University Health as a resident chaplain. There were 8 of us residents, students and ministers from all different denominations, serving Indiana University Hospital, Methodist Hospital, their Trauma One Center, and Riley Children's Hospital. We participated in clinical learning, which means that we went out into the hospital to provide care, and then we came back as a group to reflect on the care that we had provided, what we did well, what we might have done better, and then we would go out and hope to do it better the next time. We also had an individual supervisor who met with us for an hour every week to talk about what was going on inside us, with our peers, with our relationships with patients and supervisors and other chaplains. That's my job now. But back then, we students had learning goals, and one of my learning goals was to learn how better to minister to people who hold conservative, even fundamentalist theology. That was how I grew up. It meant something to me to figure that out. And I'm a universalist. I believe that we human beings are after pretty much the same things: love, connection, truth, justice. I believe with Forest Church that all religion is our human response to the dual reality of being alive and knowing we must die. But how can I serve as minister someone who believes Jesus is the only way to heaven? How can I, a secular-leaning Unitarian Universalist, serve persons who believe prayer can bring about miracle healing? There's no better place to figure that out than in the hospital. One day I was in the room of a patient who was suffering from a disease for which there is no cure. This young man was going to die. The course of the rest of his life was pretty clear. He would be in and out of the hospital. At first, he'd be home a month between stays. Slowly, that time between stays would dwindle to the point that he was in the hospital more often than he was at home. And then one day, before he was 40, having spent much of his life staring out the window of a hospital room, he would die. I spent about 30 minutes with that patient and his family, and at the end of my visit, they requested prayer. Now, that's not a problem for me. But when I asked for what they would like me to pray, one family member said, "How about a healing?" And immediately my brain started racing. How can I pray so as not to perjure myself and my own theology while still honoring theirs? What can I say and what can't I say in truth? I offered a prayer that I think must not have been great, and I left the room. I was Edward Tulane in that moment, thinking, healing. How ridiculous. I took that scenario to my supervisor in our weekly meeting, and he said something that changed my perspective. He asked me, "What do you think that person was feeling when she asked you to pray for healing?" Now, you have to know that a room full of ministers had talked about feelings. We had talked about feelings. What are you feeling? How did you feel when your colleague said that? One person answered, I'm feeling sick of talking about feelings. But often when the subject of theology came up, we switched from our hearts to our heads, and we focused mainly on academics and on the ways we were different. But of course, when this person asked for a prayer for healing, she was feeling scared. She was scared and sad and looking for an anchor in a great big storm. She didn't really need my systematic theology or my polished explanations for why healing wasn't possible, or even for me to agree with her on what healing meant. She was hurting. A comforting presence was more important than my impeccable theology. We meet people who are different from us every day, and differences are real and important, and they shouldn't be ignored. In fact, they should be celebrated often. But still, even in our difference, two human beings are meeting. Two people, both of whom need connection and love and food and shelter and clothing. So Edward lies at the bottom of the ocean for a while. But then a storm kicks up and he's washed ashore. He's found by a sailor who takes him home as a gift for his wife. And the sailor and his wife dress Edward up, and they sit him at the table and treat him like a real child, even going so far as to carry him around town and talk to him. These are people who have experienced the loss of a child. Edward begins to feel the grief that he's helping them assuage, but their adult daughter comes to visit and thinks it's all nonsense, her parents carrying around this porcelain doll, and Edward ends up in the garbage before she goes home. From there, he's rescued by another person, a little boy who knows Edward is the perfect gift for his sick sister. The boy and his sister have a father who's sinking into addiction. He gets violent. He yells at them. He's hardly ever home. He seems to have lost a piece of himself when their mother died. And now as his sister dies, Edward and the little boy are with her. When she passes away, the little boy and Edward go on the road as friends. But the boy comes on hard times and has to sell Edward to a toy store owner. And there he sits. Terry read this part of the book earlier, having years to think about his grief. He mourns the loss of everyone he's loved. And he's not sure at first whether he can ever love again, but a change is happening in Edward. And over time, he begins to long to be adopted by some little child once again. My favorite songwriter, Karen Berquist of the Cincinnati-based band Over the Rhine, wrote, "Pain is our mother. She makes us recognize each other." We're all of us, people who love and laugh and grieve, who live and die. And if we're not careful, in part because of the way we're built, because of our biology, we can be pretty judgmental. We're really good at assessing threats and categorizing things quickly as either dangerous or safe, categorizing people quickly as either dangerous or safe. But that very helpful categorization tool that has kept us as a species alive for eons can lie to us, can make us think we're in danger when we're not. But if we can see past our initial fear, sometimes people can surprise us. For many of us, our hurts become great teachers. We grow and learn to love better over time. And sometimes when we can't connect around politics or religion or our favorite sports team, our pain can connect us across real difference. In the end, Edward Tulane finally gets his wish. A little girl comes into the shop, looks over all the beautiful dolls, and chooses Edward. And after a miraculous journey of many years, Edward goes home with a little girl whom he can love with all his heart. I'll let you grab a copy of the book at the library or the bookstore to hear the rest. I love this story because Edward is like so many of us. He's self-absorbed, and can't we all be too focused on ourselves sometimes? He is so bound up in himself that he sees other people mainly for the ways they can either help or hurt him. But by experiencing love and pain and grief, by going on a human journey, Edward learns what it means to really live life. Not just critique life from the sidelines, but really live it, be in the middle of it. He can relate at the end of the book because he's had a window into other people's loves and pain. Friends, we need one another to be human, because we're social beings, because we look to one another for lessons on how to deal with stress and anxiety, because we need human connections, some more and some less, like we need food and air and water. And we need not fear our differences when we come together. If you haven't yet, I hope you'll one day have the joy of sitting across the table with someone from a different religion, a different race or gender or sexual orientation, maybe even now and then a different political party, and find that you've not only connected, but that you have things you can work on together to make the world better. So let this simple story of a China rabbit remind you to hold tenaciously to the belief that's deep in our Unitarian Universalist roots, that although our differences are important and shouldn't be glossed over, we're all more human than we are anything else. May it be so. Amen. Let us read together. This is the new guy missed the cue, so let's read together the chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again. One of the most joyful things we can do together as a human community is find new ways, more just ways, more loving ways of doing things. And so I'm going to invite you to stand with me as you're able one more time. And we'll sing together, Building a New Way. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. And now may life bless you and keep you. May the Spirit make their face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. May the universe pour out the fullness of its blessings on you and bring you peace. Go in peace, dear friends, to serve love and to serve one another. Amen. Please be seated for the postlude.